All right, welcome back to another episode of the Aspiring VC with your host, Matt Snow from Mass Ventures here. I have the pleasure of talking to Eliza Loring at Point 406 Ventures. But before we talk venture, let's talk coffee. Dunkin' or Starbucks? What's your pick?
Ooh, definitely Dunkin'. I grew up in Boston, so I'm a huge Dunkin' ride or die girl.
Perfect. Yeah, that is the right answer. It's the answer I'm looking for. So let's start the episode. So let's just do 2-minute summary here. Who are you? What's the firm and what's the role that you're in?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Matt mentioned, my name is Eliza Loring. I joined 406 in August, so I have the pleasure of being a pandemic hire. I have everyone on my team, so not to worry about that. But before 406, I started off my career at Bain and Company doing management consulting, which really gave me kind of broad exposure into different businesses and different business problems, and then applied that to later stage private equity, where I was at AEA Investors for 2 years, doing kind of industrial software transactions. And then this past summer, I joined 406. And 406, if you don't know it, is a VC firm located in Boston, focused on Series A investments in B2B kind of software companies across three core segments. Digital health is one of them, data and cloud is another one, and then cybersecurity is the third, where I focus almost all of my time. And other segments in other kind of companies that we've invested in the cybersecurity space include companies like Carbon Black or Veracode or Endori, and other 406 investments just more broadly that you might be aware of are Iora or Heartbeat Health or Equip. And so really kind of a broad swath, but I'm an associate there and really responsible for both deal sourcing, deal execution, and kind of portfolio support across the full spectrum of the kind of deal journey and process.
That's awesome. Some big heavy hitter names in that portfolio. For anyone that doesn't know, do you want to talk about like the 406 reference, where the name comes from?
Yeah, absolutely. So 406, as I mentioned, Boston based, and you might know Bostonians for being pretty intense about their professional sports teams. I, for one, am, and I know everyone, everyone at 406, whether they're from Boston or not, are kind of forced to be. And so 406 is really the genesis is it's Ted Williams' batting average at kind of his peak, and he wrote a book called The Science of Hitting, and his kind of MO is that, not well, some balls may be strikes, if they're not in his hot zone, then he won't swing at them. So even though they might be kind of in the strike zone, he knows himself well enough. He knows where he's good. He knows his strategy, and his sort of sweet spot, and what to really kind of swing his bat at. And that's sort of the corollary is 406, where we're super disciplined in our three areas. We're super disciplined in our approach in Series A, and then kind of our approach to being involved in our portfolio companies. And so while there might be a lot of really good deals out there, knowing kind of where your expertise is, and knowing where kind of your sweet spot is, or your hot spot is really kind of the key to our strategy.
Totally, yeah, and I think the portfolio speaks for itself. But now that there's so many venture funds out there, everyone has to get creative about the name. But I think this is one of the more interesting name origin stories that I've come across.
Yeah, and the other piece of it is that it starts with a dot, so it's always at the top of any list. Dot kind of number, and it was actually started by one of our founding associates back in 2005 when we were founded.
Wow, and how did the team initially come together?
Yeah, so it was started by three operators: Liam Donahue, Marina Carino, and Larry Begley, who are three kind of operators turned investors in their three kind of respective areas. And they came together to try to really bring kind of their expertise from operating and growing companies to the investing world, and applying some of those those learnings, those scar tissue, to being able to kind of scale and grow companies when they're at their inflection point, right when they're kind of have an idea, have a product, really find it, probably have a little bit of product market fit, and now we're trying to scale their go-to-market strategy and go from there. And really, because we try to be pretty involved in our portfolio companies, which is something I really was drawn to about 406 as someone who didn't want to kind of do the whole spray and pray strategy. And I think really being involved in a company and involved in kind of bringing their vision into a reality was something that is really in 406's DNA from those three founders or co-founders, and really kind of something that has stayed true kind of through our 15 years of investing, where we are really try to be real partners to our our companies. And I think all of us have some operational experience throughout our careers that we try to bring to bear uh, to our companies in whatever way we can. Although they're definitely the experts, we realize that.
No, that's awesome. And I think you've described some of this, but be interested to go back kind of all the way almost to like the beginning of going into college, to understand your origin story and how you kind of got to this kind of crazy and hard to break into world of venture.
Yeah, absolutely. Gosh, it goes back pretty far. My I grew up in a household where actually my dad was in investing, my mom was involved in business, and so around the dinner table we were always talking about what's a good deal. What's not a very interesting dinner table conversation, I realize now, but the kind of latest news in my family, in my parents' lives, often revolved around business and kind of business problems or businesses that were doing well. And so that was just kind of the vocabulary that I was equipped with at a young age. And when I went into my internships at investment banks, I was really focused on getting kind of understanding what are the different kind of fundamentals that a business is judged on, or kind of the metrics that people really value a business on. And so that was kind of my investment banking experience. And then after investment banking, I realized, hey, it's great to know a company's financials, but what I really want to understand is what's a kind of a broader purview of what makes a business successful. And I think, what I found is that it's not just finance. It might be marketing, it might be strategy, it might be just leadership, it might be whatever market segment they're in, and that's just market is experiencing some tailwinds. And so that was my really consulting experience. I felt like, I really got to know the different kind of levers that a business can pull, whether they're trying to expand into a new market, whether they're trying to cut costs and they're in a declining market. And that was sort of a really, really good broad experience. But what I would say is what drew me to investing from there was feeling like I was on the other side of the table and feeling like, you're giving these recommendations, but no one is really, you're not on the line necessarily to implement those recommendations or implement those changes. And so what I found was I really wanted to have a seat at the table of the decision making, of being a decision maker around whether to expand into that new market, whether to buy that company, and whether to what kind of levers to pull as a leader. And I spent a lot of time at Bain in the private equity group, so I was initially drawn to investing as a way to grow businesses rather than kind of being an operator. So joined AEA, which is a middle market private equity firm in New York that focuses on both industrials and consumer. And at this point in my career, I'm really not focused on industry. I'm really focused on learning like investing fundamentals and what makes a good investment and what doesn't. And so that's really what I got at AEA. I was very, very keen on understanding the frameworks for which to judge an investment. Again, combining both some of the banking experience as well as the consulting experience into creating a holistic view of what makes a company good or bad, or how much to value it. The one thing I think I found, and while my experience was phenomenal and amazing learning experience, I think the one thing that I found fell short was that, by the time a company is being bought by a private equity firm, there's been a lot of growth. This company is pretty mature. They may have hundreds of millions in revenue and hundreds of employees. And there's less, I would say, and this can be debated, but what I would argue is there's less that you can do, less levers that you can pull as both an investor and kind of a CEO to be able to make that marginal return or to grow that business. And so, as I mentioned, I really liked being involved in the portfolio companies, but what I found is that there were less ways to see tangible growth, or kind of see that inflection of strong growth at those later stages, because they've already experienced some of that hockey stick. And I wanted to be kind of at those earlier stages where every incremental decision is driving massive changes and realizing that initial vision. So I decided that I wanted to move earlier stage investing, which leads me to 406. And I didn't quite realize what I was embarking on, because I didn't know enough about venture to know how difficult it is to get into, what the different kind of ways to get into it are, because oftentimes these kind of consulting firms or private equity firms go through long, very kind of standardized processes where you sort of know what you're getting into and you just throw your name in the hat and go from there. But what for 406, it was really it was just very opportunistic. And so I had gone to an HBS VC PE conference back in February before the world shut down, had taken down 406's name as a company that I thought, hey, this is pretty interesting, but I have no idea, whether they're hiring or at what point I'll want to make that move to VC. But really, after my 2 years at AEA was the right time. Reached out to 406. They had just had an associate leave to go work in a portfolio company, and so went through a pretty rapid interview process and got a role there. But it was definitely a quick and targeted process versus probably some of the other kind of broad a broader interview process across hundreds of or tens of VC firms, because of just sort of the opportunistic nature of the job process. Sorry, that was a long answer to your question.
No, it's good. I wouldn't downplay your other experiences. I mean, you basically got into investment banking, top tier consulting, private equity, and then venture. It's 4 areas all known for being extremely competitive, extremely hard to break into. So would be interested on, I think we have a sense for how you found your kind of passion and knew you wanted to be in the business world and kind of navigated all of those things to the current experience, but maybe on your networking and at each stage going after the internships and the jobs, like, what worked for you?
Yeah, and one of the things I really liked about VC is that it really married the qualitative skills and the quantitative skills. I spent a lot of time in quantitative and wanted to get back to the qualitative, which is where I think that, I'm probably best positioned, and where I think a lot of VCs probably find themselves as well. And so as a result of sort of that innate interest in people, I've basically felt like I've been like networking my entire career. I've spent so much of my time mentoring younger people, trying to get into the industry, talking to friends, family friends, people I keep in touch with people relatively well. So I spend probably, even when I'm not in a job process, I would say a few hours a month just talking to people. Have absolutely no value necessarily that I'm deriving from them, but rather just keeping up the relationship. And because of that, I feel like I've been fortunate to have a couple of really good experiences, or to be able to have some really good mentors that are looking out for me and kind of making me aware of other opportunities. And so, for example, my investment banking experience was 2 years in investment banking, 2 summers in investment banking. And after my second summer, I realized I wanted to transition into consulting. I had interviewed for consulting for my junior summer and did not get a junior summer internship, and so went back to that investment bank. But I kept up in really good touch with my interviewers since not getting the job, and just said, what's the latest? When is your full-time interview process kicking off? And because it's established that relationship and kept up with them, even though they had, rejected me, I got like an accelerated interview process and was able to get a full-time job much faster before having the pool opened up to the entire kind of college application community. So that was like an example of just really where networking just, I think, really pays off. And I feel like people have also really given me opportunities throughout my various jobs to explore different passions. At one point, I wanted to move to the Middle East and do like business and foreign policy in the Middle East. And I spent like 3 months talking to different people doing that, which I obviously didn't end up pursuing, but I think continue while you're at your job, trying to find time to really explore different passions and making sure that you're not just one track minded, is really helped me be able to really feel committed to what I'm doing and say, okay, at least I explored that option. At least I explored this option, but I feel really good about the path that I'm on because I think it's really just validation along the way.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the importance of doing these calls where you're not just always thinking about taking value, but just being on the phone with people and keeping relationships alive and paying it forward to whatever way you can, considering how much all of us rely on the help that others have given us, is huge. I do have to ask to understand this parallel world, what would you have done in the Middle East? Did you want to be an ambassador for a specific country or what?
That's a good
What would you have
question.
ended up doing?
Oh my gosh, I had studied the kind of Middle Eastern foreign politics, it just or like foreign relations in college as one of my majors, and I was kind of wanting to like go run a nonprofit that was going to help refugees get jobs, and I ended up joining, and because I that didn't end up working, I ended up joining a board of a company or a nonprofit called Reclaim Childhood, which is a basically helps. I played soccer in college, so it helps women refugees in Jordan, like learn sports and take them out of their terrible like living conditions and connect with others. So anyway, it was going to be something with a nonprofit, something consultative, because that's where I was coming from. But again, it's just, I think the more you know and the more you learn about what else is out there, I think the more that you can be educated about your decisions and what you want to do next, even if you're not necessarily running a job process. It's really about learning what other people are doing and taking a little bit from every conversation from saying, that sounds interesting, I might want to do that next, or I thought that was interesting, but the way I see it in practice is actually not that appealing anymore.
Absolutely. And, perfect transition into my next question, which is like, what impact do you want to have in the world?
Yeah, I think for me, I have always been really mission oriented as a person, and as sort of how I've led my life, and that drove the Middle Eastern stuff, that drove the transition to kind of VC really too, is really helping companies be able to realize their potential, and provide them with not only, of course, the funding, but the kind of the expertise and the know-how and the tools to be able to bring kind of a more efficient and a more equitable world. And whether that's healthcare organizations that help provide better kind of maternity care for underserved women and using both technology and services, or whether that's in cybersecurity, where I spend a lot of my time, which is protecting people's data and private information, or protecting our government from being attacked like what we saw in the SolarWinds attack. It's really trying to help provide companies the opportunities to really be able to seize an opportunity in a market, and therefore bring real efficiency and benefit to the public from kind of bringing these products to market. There's just so much innovation that's happening around us, and so many incredibly smart people that really just need, that have maybe expertise in one area, but need a broader network or a board or a VC firm to really be able to help those companies bring to bear the kind of the fruits of their innovation. And so that's the kind of thing that I really am. It gets me excited to do my job, is feeling like we're really helping companies that are going to make a big difference in the world. And so being able to be at the forefront of that and to be able to meet those people, is just something that is so exciting to me, and it makes me feel like I'm making an impact, but just by a kind of nurturing and helping kind of helping to accelerate the growth of these companies that might otherwise take some more time to really bring product to market.
Yeah, and I think I can see why, or maybe part of why you end up focusing on cyber. You think of like literally everything that's about to happen with IoT going forward, and it's just like this critical layer of the entire piece. Uh,
Yeah,
and like, it's so important for protecting our way of life, basically in general in the West. Um,
yeah.
how do you try and stay on top of all the developments there's so much going on there? Like how do you try and stay on top of what's happening in cyber and really be on that like next wave?
Yeah, so for me, I think there's a couple different mediums and I think, to preface this, I had no cybersecurity background at all. And so to anyone who's listening to this that, has any interest in some kind of deep tech, investing or startup that doesn't really feel like they have the background in it, I would encourage you to just go for it because you would be surprised at your capacity to learn. You'd be surprised with other people's capacity to be patient with you as you learn. And I feel like that's just been kind of the story of my life over the last year is getting up to speed on a space where I really, you know, I, I was using the same passwords for like everything that I was doing. It's like you're just not at all a practice but you preach type of girl. And so what I've done over the past probably 9 months that I've been really focused on this area. I both read, I kind of stay on top of latest research reports. So, there's a bunch of great industry reports that are published every year, every quarter that I kind of pour over. There is great analyst research that's out there on kind of the activity. And then I think, for some of us, I think really just listening to other people talk about it and having the reps to be able to hear other people explain something in different ways has also been really helpful for me. So I will listen to webinars, I will listen to podcasts, I'll talk to other investors and see what they're, talking about or they're hearing in the market. And then I think you marry that with just reading the news and just seeing, okay, this is what companies are dealing with. These are their pain points. And this is kind of feels like could be the next frontier of security. So I think it's a kind of variety of different inputs, but all of it sort of rolls up into a point of view over time.
And I did want to ask earlier because I knew you mentioned that you played soccer in college, and I feel like that got lost. And I'm curious how like being a college athlete has maybe impacted your view on like work and life. And
Yeah.
it seems like sports and athletics is still a bit kind of a big part of, I guess, your like your mindset and everything.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's part of how I think about how I'm dedicating my like charitable time with this reclaimed childhood. So it totally is. And I think for me, being on a sports team has been the kind of spark that has led me to these kind of team-based career opportunities. So I've always really gotten my energy from other people. I've always gotten really a lot of or I guess a lot of benefit from the collaboration and the kind of collective thinking that comes with being in a company or on a team that people bring different expertises or different thoughts. And so I really felt like sports was the thing that helped me realize that being on a team is very important to me and very important to how I think and how I want to operate on a day-to-day basis. And then I think the other piece of it is just being a little competitive too. I mean, I think that I definitely, I take it personally when we lose a deal or I really want to go that extra mile to be able to impress that founder or get that person on the calendar to be able to make sure that our partnership understands what's good or what's bad about a deal. And so I think, listen, we all work hard, and I'm definitely not saying that I work harder than anyone else on this who's listening to this, but I just think that the mindset of kind of scrappiness and a little bit of hustle, I think has also been helpful in VC. And I guess the one last thing, I think with so many different balls in the air in VC, I think it's really helpful to be really organized. And I think as a result of being kind of a college athlete, I had to be super organized my time and how I spent my days because I only had, I was playing a lot. I was in practice for a couple hours a day and then I had limited time to do work. And so just making sure that, and I guess that kind of time management sort of translated into the workforce as well.
Totally, yeah. I've heard one of my mentors say like applying a sense of urgency whenever you can, even if it's completely not needed. Um,
Yeah.
just kind of helps to always be, speeding things up whenever possible.
Yeah. And as an associate, I think that it's really just important to show your willingness to learn and your coachability and your just kind of overall your can-do attitude. And I think that is something that comes from just sometimes being on the bench, sometimes being like, in the spotlight. And I think you just get that kind of mentality from playing a variety of different roles in a variety of different teams.
Absolutely. If now's a good time, we can move into some of these rapid fire questions.
Yeah, sure.
So, first one, who's been one of your most important mentors? What I caveat is if you remember something they did or something they said that still stands in mind today.
Mm, it's a really good. So probably my most important mentor is a woman named Allison Mass, who was basically my first boss at Goldman. And she is just a total kick-ass woman and has risen through the ranks and just really an unbelievable person. But I would say what she's told me is that, you really need to think about your life in like concentric circles and be able to realize what is the most important non-compromising thing when it comes to kind of work-life balance or managing your time, and bucket all of those items. It could be getting 8 hours of sleep. It could be getting your coffee in the morning. It could be, seeing your friends once a week, whatever it is, and making sure that you're not compromising those circles, and then being able to see and categorize what kind of on the outer skirts could sometimes you're okay with compromising maybe, but just having a real kind of framework about thinking about how to manage your time and how to balance both work and how to balance your life as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. I really like that. Outside of 406, who's one of your favorite VCs, either another firm or like a specific GP somewhere?
Yeah, I would say my favorite VC, although we haven't worked with them at 406, their strategy is, I would say, slightly different than ours, but just a VC that I really respect is one called Gingerbread Capital. They invest in primary or only women founders, and so their principal focus is really bringing capital and kind of tools and kind of a network to women founders who are oftentimes underrepresented in kind of the VC funding landscape. And they've done some awesome deals, and they just have a great, I would say, just a great strategy, and been very super successful in that, and finding those women entrepreneurs that are really on the precipice of something great, but may have sort of fallen under the radar, or may just need the expertise of a VC to bring their product or their idea to life.
That's awesome. I know we've done some blog posts too about like recently just kind of celebrating some of the women founders in our portfolio. And it's really kind of amazing to see their impact. And I know that
Yeah,
groups like Backstage Capital are doing a great job in this realm as well.
absolutely.
When you look at startups, what are the characteristics that start to get you really excited about a business?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, it's really the team, and understanding their backgrounds, why they are solving this problem, why they're solving it in this specific way, and what their kind of their background or their kind of expertise from their previous positions has brought them or has kind of made them or built them into kind of who they are today, and why they are where they are. So that's kind of first and foremost, in making sure that they are the right people, and they're kind of thinking about the problem, and that they're trying to solve in a really kind of methodical way. And then I think really the other piece of it is making sure that there is a real pain point on the other side of it. So making sure, call it oftentimes at 406 a bleeding head wound, and seeing that customers on the other side of it really, really desperately need this product, or really struggle with whatever this product is striving to solve on a day-to-day basis. That it's a priority for them, and that they're kind of that there's a market for it out there, and that the market is here and now, and not necessarily in 5 or 10 years, or that it's number 1, 2, or 3 priority versus 4, 5, 6. And so that's the other piece of what we often spend time in diligence doing, is understanding both the team and the problem that they think is there, but also marrying that with the kind of potential buyer and what their perspective is, and how they view the kind of differentiation versus what they either have today, or what their alternatives for spending their budgeted money are.
Yeah, I love that. I think, with cyber and health, you can quite literally have that bleeding head wound, but, like,
Yeah.
the hedge fund world is known for being much better than the VC world, right, about marketizing and the importance of the market.
Yeah,
Um, and so I do love venture funds that kinda emphasize, understanding that market. And the second layer, way more complicated, is trying to predict the timing of the market growth, which no one actually
totally.
knows.
Yeah.
But it's super interesting to hear that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like one of our investments, for example, is a company called Tausight, which is they will help kind of identify and identify and like kind of discover PHI, so like kind of public health, or sorry, what am I saying? Public health information, PHI. Anyway, they will help visualize that for a hospital and understand when your PHI is going into a kind of a vulnerable state, whether there's someone putting PHI on a USB and taking it out of the computer with 30,000 patient records on it, and or kind of doctors sending PHI over an unencrypted PHI over email, like a Gmail. And so that's the kind of thing that we keep hearing from hospitals is a huge, huge problem, is just patient data is everywhere and doctors are working from home. And there's, sharing of data that's mandated by law now. And so hearing those types of anecdotes, as well as having that supported by real market research, I feel like is the type of thing that really got us excited about that specific opportunity.
Absolutely. And, um, in terms of both, I guess now the cyber focus, but also the kind of venture and tech more broadly, what are you following in terms of like podcasts and blogs, and then maybe some of your favorite books as well?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I would say in terms of, I start off my day reading like New York Times Daily News. I read Term Sheet, I read Axios. That's just like my daily routine. But then I would say there's other kind of cybersecurity blogs or VC blogs that I subscribe to and that are really been really helpful for me. So an example, actually, Axios also has a cybersecurity focused newsletter, um, which is great to read, and that comes out once a week. There are some VCs that actually have some really interesting blogs or kind of newsletters that I like to read. One is from Frank Wang, and from Dell Capital, and he has just some interesting takes. I really appreciate that. So those are some of the reading from podcasts. I listen to the TechCrunch podcast. There's a few cybersecurity specific podcasts that I like. And then book wise, I don't have a lot of time to read books, but I would say, I don't know, some of these kind of industry reports can feel like a book because they're like 150 pages. So those are probably how I spend most of my book reading time. It feels like is reading just these massive PDFs. But yeah, those are some of the resources I like to either frequent on a daily basis or just read on a Sunday afternoon kind of thing.
No, that's awesome. I like the note about, yeah, I feel like whenever you see 100-page PDF, it's so daunting. It's like, oh man,
I know. It's
I
like
can
this
do
is
this.
just like if you saw it printed out in a book, it would be like bound.
Yeah, no, there's just a lot to go through there.
Yeah.
So this is a question that took from Tim Ferriss, but really love this one is, what's a purchase of like $100 or a couple $100 that has had like an outsized impact of like happiness or utility for you?
That is such a good question.
And I've
I would
had, for
say,
context, like people have said like AirPods, they've talked about bicycles, workout equipment, home,
yeah, okay, okay. Well,
anything.
I won't say Peloton because I feel like probably some people have said Peloton before, and would be 100% what I would say if I knew that wasn't an unoriginal question, or I'll answer your question. But I guess, I would say that we invested early on in a coffee maker, which has been really helpful because I go through coffee. I mean, this is just right in front of me right now. You can't even see it, but there's two coffee cups, and so I think actually those are from coffee stores, so I don't use it too as often as I should. But I feel like it has saved me from wasting thousands of dollars on blue bottle coffee or other coffee shops that will totally gouge you. But but in the work from home life, you kind of need it.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. It looks like you're a hot coffee drinker. I'm like a longtime iced coffee person.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's like the Dunkin' style for sure.
But I do whenever I'm doing like an important external meeting, I like to bring a hot coffee because I know that there's that psychological thing where when you're holding a cup of hot coffee, you come off as more appealing to the other person.
Is that
Yeah.
true? I did
So
not know that.
something about the hot coffee giving off a warm and inviting vibe. So
That's
that's nice.
so funny.
A
Oh
nice
my
little one
gosh.
you can utilize if you're meeting a
Huh.
founder really trying to convince.
All
Don't
right.
come in with your, large ice cold brew because that's not the vibes you want to give off.
No, no, no. I'm so glad I naturally am drawn to something that people are also naturally drawn to like. So that's good.
Yeah, it says something about you.
Learn something new.
Let's make sure you promote yourself. Twitter, LinkedIn, any of those things. Where can people find you?
Yeah, Twitter, LinkedIn. I am going to start writing on Medium. There'll be a post coming out hopefully in a week or two. And Instagram. Yeah, those are kind of my primary social media kind of mediums. So feel free to follow me, Eliza Loring.
Awesome. Well, Eliza, I really appreciate the time. I know that you've got a lot going on, and really appreciate that you took some time to drop some wisdom on the podcast and let people know your story.
Of course, and I love mentoring others. I love being, helpful to anyone, who's trying to start a career in business, whether it's in VC or whether it's not. So if you need any help or advice or just want kind of a listening ear, I'm kind of inbox is always open.
Well, thanks again, and we'll be in touch.
Looking to innovate, invent, and disrupt? We're your partner to fuel your growth. Contact us to learn more.